Good evening and welcome to New Canaan Library. My name is Heather Cimino and I coordinate adult programs here. For tonight's event, we are honored to welcome Molly Jong-Fast, who will be talking about her new book called How to Lose Your Mother, A Daughter's Memoir. And Molly will be in conversation with Kathleen Saxton. So How to Lose Your Mother is a memoir about an intense mother-daughter relationship, a sometimes chaotic upbringing with a fame-hungry parent, and the upheavals and challenges that are hard-won in our adulthood. Molly Jong-Fast is the only child of feminist writer Erica Jong. Erica is most famous for her book, Fear of Flying. So Molly Jong-Fast, famous in her own right, is a contributing writer at Vanity Fair, a political analyst at MSNBC News, and host of the podcast Fast Politics with Molly Jong-Fast. Molly graduated from Barnard College and then got her MFA at Bennington, and she lives in New York City with her husband and 3 children. Kathleen Saxton is a psychotherapist, executive coach, author, and advisor. And her new book just came out in September, and it's called Parent The Peacock, Discovery and Recovery from Narcissistic Parenting. So, so spot on, I think. So if you'd like to buy Kathleen's book, I've got the inside scoop from Eve at Elm Street Books, and there's some at the store in town if you're interested in buying it. Thank you, Kathleen, for flying in from London to be here. We really appreciate that. Molly will be signing books after the event in the back, and you can buy a book if you have not already done so. So please help me welcome Molly Jong-Fast and Kathleen Saxton.
Hi, thank you guys so much for having me. It's New Canaan, I love Connecticut. I'm like a Connecticut, I'm married to a nutmegger. So my kids always make fun of me because I was born in Stamford. So they're like, you say you grew up in New York, but you're really from Connecticut. So Connecticut is a big part of our lives.
Molly, it's so lovely to see you and have you here. So thank you so much for making the time. I know you're running around doing so many different things, writing columns, being on television, doing your book promotion. You must be exhausted a little bit.
I am not so, I slept till 7:05 today, which is like, I noticed like there's a huge quality of life issue between like getting up at 6:30 and getting up at 7. Like for some reason 7 is like, oh, I'm on vacation. I'm at a spa. So I got up at 7. I was like, this is amazing. I'm okay.
Pleased to hear it.
Yeah.
Well, all of you that have come tonight, and lovely to have you here. So, and thank you for letting me come and ask you some questions. Please think of some questions for Molly, because we are going to come to you a bit later on. So if you've got a burning question, get it ready, because we're going to come to the
And then I have
audience.
questions about narcissistic parents.
I can answer anything you'd like me to.
I was like sitting here and I was listening to your introduction. I was like, should she be my therapist? Like, does she live in the UK? Can I get her to... Anyway, so go on.
We can
we'll
discuss
talk
that later,
yeah.
for sure. I've got lots of questions. I know you said I can ask you anything, so we're going to try and be explorative, because I'm sure you're being asked similar questions.
Yes.
So I'm trying to make sure we do something different tonight.
So I have this theory, which is like that... first of all, I feel like if I am going to write a book, I should tell you everything. It should be super honest. It should never... there shouldn't be... Can I curse? How genteel is this crowd? Okay. It shouldn't be bullshit. Like, if you're going to spend $26 on my book, you should absolutely get exactly what happened. But the other thing is, my other theory is that it doesn't matter what you ask people, because they'll just say whatever they want. And I think that's from interviewing politicians, because, like, you could ask them and you'll be like, that isn't even anything about what I was talking about. And so that's my theory. So I always say, like, ask me anything, because in my head, I'm like, I'm probably not going to answer anyway. But yes, I'll try.
I'm going to give it my best shot, Molly, for you. So I'm going to start with Mother, obviously. Mother's generation of feminists broke enormous grounds, but at times was requiring sort of to perform liberation, so that publicity and intimacy and the collateral damage of those two things was quite interesting. Looking back, do you think that the kind of public feminism left the room for emotional availability at home?
So, here's what I would say about like public feminism. They Betty Friedan like walked so I could tweet. Like these women, there is no Molly Jong-Fast without like a Betty Friedan and an Erica Jong and a Andrea Dworkin and like these women. Like my mom was born in a world where like women couldn't have mortgages. They couldn't have checking accounts. Like it was such a different universe, and the things they did for us, I do not discredit or discount it. Like I think that there's no world in which I exist without those women, and my daughter, doesn't exist without the bridge that we are. I think that they got a little bit caught up. And I think, there's this book, Backlash, by Susan Faludi, which is like the kind of seminal text on the way in which the women's movement was sort of used to undermine itself later on. And I don't think it was their fault. Like, I think like so many things, there was a concerted effort in when a culture moves forward, it then also moves backwards. And I think there was a lot, just like we're going through it's really like what we're going through right now. Progress is incredibly scary. And I think that there were concerted efforts in ways to move them back, to use their own divisions to move them back a certain amount too. So I think that I don't think it was their fault, but I do think that there were some problems,
I understand. Just bringing it to the book specifically for the second. So the readers, I certainly when reading the book, and I read it very quickly, it's very, very readable and very funny. I'm sure those of you who've written it, it's very tightly written, it's beautiful. But quite a delicate negotiation between sort of admiration and anger and empathy and exhaustion. I wonder which of those emotions was dominant as you were writing this?
So that the real this is like a function of the problem of writing a memoir, and also it's just very difficult to, you don't write a memoir like this if you have a really perfect relationship with your parent, right? Like this is the understatement of the year. Like if you have a perfect relationship with your parents, there's nothing for the memoir to contain, right? Like but you also don't, as someone who's 47, I'm old enough so that I'm no longer a child, right? So that relationship is no longer the relationship that at one time I was so caught in. And so, and I also think I think the tension with memoir is that like you need the relationship to be a certain amount of bad to be an interesting memoir, but you need it not to be so bad that it's like just it's too upsetting to enjoy, if that makes sense. So you really want a memoir where it's relatable, but also you don't want it to be you necessarily. That's what I think. I mean, the best memoirs, like when I think of the memoirs that are, this memoir was meant to be written in the tradition of A Year of Magical Thinking, right? Like a journalistic trip through a very bad year and working through it. The problem with Joan Didion, and I am both an admirer of her writing, and I knew her a little bit, and I was sort of an admirer of her. She was never, and I say this as someone who knew her and knew Quintana and knew all the players. I don't think she was capable of the kind of honesty about the players. And I think that was part of it was because of she just came from a different world of very genteel California. And so that I found frustrating. But so I tried to be a little more honest, but she's her prose are incredible, and her literary, she's facile, and I aspire to be her in the literary way.
Talking of that, you humanise your mum very much more in this book, and to me, there's a shift between the legend and then the woman, and of course, then the mother within that. At what point in writing the book did she no longer be the myth of that and become more the mother that you could sort of meet to eye in looking at what was happening to her? You talked about denial as well just then. There was a lot of denial from her about what was even going on with her dementia, never mind what had happened for you both in your past.
You know, there's like a thing that happens with famous people where they become like delicious, right? There's something about them that's so appealing. And it's like, I always say, like, fame is the closest thing we have to a magic in American life, right? Like, the rules don't apply to them. They can do whatever they want. They get special treatment. And so she had a little bit of that fairy dust, you know, when she'd come home in a stretch limousine or she'd disappear for a month. You know, there was a sense in which the normal sort of like physics of life did not apply to her. And that is a little bit confusing, and it made it harder for me to kind of be able to assess what she was. But I really wanted to tell the story of like what we both were, because there was, in a lot of ways, like I feel I failed as much in that relationship as she did in the end. Like, and what was cool about writing this book was it got me to a place where I like forgave her, forgave myself, was like, this was the best we could do at the moment. And because I do think like a memoir where the other person is still so furious it's not a good feeling. And it's also like, it's not meant to be like, it's meant to like actually be about an experience and this sort of closure of it. Like, this was really about like a midlife year that made me an adult. And then I also think it's about like, so I'm not mad at her, but I'm also not blameless. Like, I'm also guilty too. And I think that is something that I think worked well reading the book, but also is a way to like, to have written this and had the experience and to sort of be a human through it.
Yeah, I noticed that towards the end of the book, you, particularly when Ken passed away, you talk about, was I a good daughter? Could I have been a better daughter? And the sort of journey through that. Of the emotions of this, Molly, as you were writing it, what surprised you most about maybe sadness that it brought, or even gratitude as you were writing this book? What came for you?
I mean, I definitely felt like I had that I was through it. Like, I felt like that there was something, you know, I always, when people say, well, is writing therapy? And I hate that, because I feel like therapy is therapy and writing is writing, right? Actually, you know, Susan Cheever has this great book that just came out about her dad, and his short stories called When All the Men Wear Hats. And they have this fight between them where he says, like, you know, writing is art, and she says, you know, writing is carpentry. You know, that's sort of the argument that you have in a family of writers about what is writing. And, you know, I don't like the idea that you're sitting through my therapy sessions because I want more for you as a reader. But I do think that there's something like weird and amazing about memoir, and you do, in fact, move to a different place from writing it. And hopefully, if it's a good memoir, you move to a different place from reading it, too.
That's very true. And I think I definitely felt that with you. I don't know you before, but I really felt that I was understanding the journey that you were going through with Mum. Now, clearly, narcissism has come into the book. I think at some point in the book, you say world's greatest narcissist in it. What do you make of that? What does that mean to you? How has that been for you as the child of one that you suspect has been one?
So it's funny because it's like, I actually really, the last like 10 years, I don't know how do you guys want no politics? A little politics? Oh, we want politics. All right. Yes, my blue state. I always want to be careful. So like the last 10 years, it's like if George Conway gives me another lecture about how Donald Trump's a narcissist, I know, George, I know. So like he was like, and he's a malignant narcissist, da 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 da. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Does it seem to me like Donald Trump's biggest problem is that he's a narcissist? No. I think his biggest problem is any number of other things that he's doing to our democracy. So that's why I always sort of bristle with it. Was my mom a narcissist? I think she had a very difficult time seeing people who were not part of her. It was very hard for her. It's funny because it's like I have a personality that's very adult child of an alcoholic, very kind of like looking around to make sure everyone's happy. Is this okay? Is this person uncomfortable? And so it's hard for me to put my mind into what it would be like to be a narcissist. It does sound kind of liberating a little bit, just to worry about yourself, but I don't know how much she could control what it was. And, and I write about this a lot. My grandmother was really nuts. And so my grandmother, I don't know how interesting this is. Is this interesting? Okay.
Riveted.
All right. So my grandmother was this painter, and her father had been a very successful portrait painter and had really been able to sort of parlay that into a career. And my grandmother had really wanted to be famous, a lot. And she had been friends with a painter who had been a little more famous, but not so famous. And in her mind, I really believe she had convinced herself that having children was the reason why she had never gotten famous, which is a truly insane thing to think. And she really did instill into her children that if you had children, it could prevent you from being famous. And so I do think my mom worked really hard not to be like that. And my grandmother was incredibly hilarious, but also just very, very mean in a hilarious way, but quite mean to my mother. And so my mom did this thing where she was never mean to me, and she was really careful not to be mean. And as someone who also has this hilarious mean streak, which I have to not use because it's so mean, I do appreciate my mom's ability not to ever do that, because that is very destructive.
I get that. Your humour, though, runs through this book, Molly, like an electric current. I mean, it really does. And I wonder, were there moments in writing this book where the humour somehow deserted you?
No, because it was so this book is about the worst year of my life, and there were these moments where things were so bad, I thought it was hilarious. I was like, no, well, they're at this hospital, and then you have to go to Sloan Kettering, and I was like, no. And, so I found the humor I tend to find the humor in things that are really bad. And that has been kind of my savior. So, no, I mean, I think the humor is equal parts absurdity. So when things are really bad and it's, in an absurd way, that is in itself hilarious.
You're saying that, I think about the Ken Follett
yes.
speech that you wrote about, which just sounds absolutely dreadful. But I can imagine hiding in the kitchen as you did.
So Ken Follett, I was convinced, my mom had been friends with this writer, Ken Follett, who's written a lot of books. And I had actually, I had thought, I think he's my father. And I was like, I'm pretty sure he's my father. And I said to my husband, I'm pretty sure Ken Follett's my father. And he said, I don't think he is. But so then I went to Ken and I said, I'm pretty sure you're my father. And he was like, no. He's like, I'm absolutely not your father. I met you in 1983. So, but I did have a whole thing, because it would make sense, but no.
Not the case. Please do. Now, inversion of roles, you talked a little bit about becoming the adult and this sort of battle. I think you talk at some points in the book about this sort of 13-year-old child having to finally take the reins, etc., and the inversion of that. What surprised you about that shift? At what point did you finally accept this shift has happened and it's come?
When your parents, So when we put my mom in this place and that was it was like, oh, it's over. Like I'm no longer, for such a long time I had been like, something, she could like ruin my life. She could do something really destructive that would ruin my life. And then all of a sudden it was like, no, it's over. And it was a really weird feeling. And my dad, who had this famous father, Howard Fast, who had written Spartacus, and he had a similar feeling when his father died. Like it, and my mother didn't die, but she had, she has dementia, and we put her in this place. And it was just like, it was like we were no longer, it wasn't as much, it just was like I was no longer in it in the same way. And it was very strange because I had devoted so much energy into like hoping that this person wouldn't do something super destructive. And then all of a sudden it was like they kind of couldn't do anything. And it was very strange. And I think like when you have a relationship like that where it's just like, it sucked up so much of the oxygen in my life for such a long time. And then all of a sudden it was over. It was very, very strange. And I've sort of never, I kind of never, I mean, it's been, a year or two and I still am not totally adjusted to it.
On the grief of that, Molly, sometimes people say, particularly if there has been some level of narcissism, let's say, or a difficult relationship, that we grieve the childhood we didn't have as much as the person that's actually leaving us in some form. Did you feel that sort of duplex of grief?
So I have thoughts on this idea because like what people would always say, like, I never understood like nostalgia for your childhood because I was like, my childhood was so scary. Like, why would anyone want that? And then I came to this theory, which is like, if you have a bad childhood, if you have a good childhood, you are like nostalgic, you want it back, you think of like how this sort of great moments. And if you have a bad childhood, like you're stuck in it. Like it feels like it never ends. I would have dreams about my childhood well into my 30s and 40s. And I would, I'd have these anxieties that were clearly from things that had happened in, years and years before. And I did feel like I kind of got out of it, that there was a sense in which I had sort of finally gotten out of my childhood.
Which is interesting because it feels that the whole story has got your family in total has lots of sort of mythology around it to some degree, so much of that. And I just wondered, how much did that hurt you and how much has that now freed you? What does it cost you? What has it liberated you from?
I think it's a function of like coming from a storyteller family. It's like my grandfather was, went to jail during the House on Un-American Activities, was 3 months in a prison in West Virginia after, and then he was blacklisted, and then they went to Mexico because they couldn't leave the country. Well, they didn't have passports because the government had taken away all their passports, and then the Supreme Court ruled that they could get passports. But so there was like this mythology of that, this story of like grandpa in Mexico in the desert being blacklisted. And then my mother had this like crazy story where she had been married to someone who had gone crazy, married a shrink, then married my father, then dated everyone in the world and was engaged many, many times, and then got married for a fourth time. So there was like a lot of mythology. And then, but honestly, the stupidest thing in our family was that my grandfather would always be like, we're related to Shalom Aleichem, who wrote Fiddler on the Roof. And I was like, why do you care? What a weird brag. Like, I would be like, what's so stupid? And I would always be like, there's no, and also like the other thing about like coming from a family of storytellers is that everybody lies, right? So like they're storytellers, but they're also liars a little bit. So he'd be like, we're related to Shalom Aleichem. My dad would be like, we're definitely not related to Shalom. This is like absolutely a lie. we're related to Shalom Aleichem. We found out on 23, and it was like the dumb for years. I was like, A, it's not true, and B, it's so stupid. But in fact, it is true. I mean, he's not like my grandfather, but he's related, and it was not a lie. But yes, mythology, storytellers, lying, it's all the same.
Yeah, I love this new news. This is breaking news. I'm loving
right.
it. Anyone that's had a self-involved parent, if we can put it that way, is obviously can be very difficult because maybe the apology or the recognition of what they've done never truly comes, and we either hold out for it or we discover it's never going to come. In those kind of final years that have been going on for Mum with the dementia when she's in and out of lucidity, did you try? Did you hope? What was going on there?
No, and I actually think it's really, I mean, I wouldn't have done it had she not been demented either, because I got to a point in my life where I thought it was really unfair to try to get her to take culpability for things she just didn't feel they were her fault. And part of my feeling is, and I've been sober since I was 19, and I think that's why I have come to a place of like understanding about like my own family dynamics, is just that like it would be unfair to ask things of her that she cannot do. Like I could only ask what was, and the other thing was like it wasn't kind to try to get her to take responsibility for things. First of all, it was over, right? Like it's all over. All that stuff is over, and it's not her, and it's not really anyone's fault. Like it just is. And so I felt like I was able to kind of, I wouldn't push her for stuff like that. Like it's not going to do anything for anyone. And I feel like I have enough of a feeling of like finality to be okay with however it played out. So I wouldn't do that.
I'm heartened to hear that.
Yeah.
It's good news.
Yeah.
As a mother yourself, 3 times over.
Yes.
What do you feel that this experience with your journey in life has made sure you absolutely do as a mother, or indeed avoid like the plague?
So my kids are absolutely going to write about me. It's funny because I always like justify it because I'm like, she wrote about me all the time, right? Like my whole life she was writing about me. So whenever people are like, why do you think it's okay that you write about your mother? I'm like, I was in every book. Like, it's not like I was like in a few things. I was in everything. But I don't write about my kids because I just felt like let them, have their lives. I also felt like, this is going to sound really cooked, and just nuts. But I always felt like being written about meant that I couldn't be a Supreme Court justice. Okay, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to be a Supreme Court justice. I'm not a judge. But for whatever reason, I was like, it means I can only be one thing, right? I can only be public facing. I don't think that's true at all. But for whatever reason, so I was like, I want my kids, if they want to be Supreme Court justices, to be able to be Supreme. Literally no one is going to be a Supreme Court justice. But I just felt like when you make a decision like that, it is a broad, sweeping, when you make your kid into that, when you put your kid in that world, they then don't really get to choose. And I think a lot of times it might be okay, but I just didn't want to make that choice for them.
I get it. On moral clarity, you're known for moral clarity in your commentary, very much so, and rightly so. Did that clarity serve you well in writing some of these things, or did you feel therefore you needed to blur it a little to protect someone that you loved?
I was careful with this book. Some of it is because I also was I don't know if you guys know this, but it's an incredibly scary moment in American politics. And so, there was another reason why I was careful with my kids is because, I didn't want them to get murdered. And I really, and because remember, I'd grown up in, this 1980s world of, people getting kidnapped. So people's kids getting kidnapped. In the 80s, that was a thing. People's kids got kidnapped. So I was that combination, and then my mom having a stalker, had always made me a little, even more than a little paranoid. So so that was another reason why the kids really did not get much airtime. But I also think, I don't know, I felt like, I actually really hate talking about my personal life because I think it's very boring. But, and I like talking about politics because even though there are elements of it that are very dysfunctional, there's a lot of, especially what's really interesting right now is because everything's gotten so small and there's so little mainstream media, there's a lot to say. And there's like a lot that, at the beginning of Trump 1.0, there were, you'd write a column about something and there'd be like 50 other columns. Like everyone would swing at that same pitch. And now, because there's just so much less content, it actually, there's real opportunity to create ideas that other people aren't creating, which is pretty interesting. I mean, it's also incredibly upsetting, but, it's both.
We have no leg to stand on from the UK.
Yeah.
We literally barely have a leader, never mind
Well, you
anything
guys
else.
have more, but you have more media outlets,
We do.
which is good.
Yeah, we do. We have difference of opinion that can be shared many times over in different spaces.
Right.
That's very true. Back to the book for a second. Is there a passage, Molly, that now when you reread it or someone reads it to you, you still find is quite evocative emotionally for you?
I think this book is pretty good. I mean, I have to say, not to toot my own horn here, but it's pretty good. I mean, it got some good reviews. I mean, the story with this book is that when I published it, so I sold it, I spent all the money, and then I had to write it, and I was like, this was a terrible idea. And then right before it came out, I had this moment where I was like, I have ruined my life. This was a terrible, I finally was not a Nepo baby. And then I'm like, no, my mom's Erica Jong. It was like, I had this moment where I was like, this was so stupid. What was I thinking? And then it got some good reviews, sold some copies, and I thought, oh no, this was a good idea. So I feel good about, I feel good about some elements of this book. I would not necessarily ever want to write a book like this ever again because I just feel like I had something that I had sort of a convergence of events that worked well for what it was. But yeah, I'm out of the writing about my mom stuff, hopefully.
Do you think it's changed the public's view of your mum in any way?
No. And I mean, what my mom wanted was legacy. What she wanted was to matter, right? She wanted her books to be read 50 years from now. And it's funny because it's like the group of writers she came up with, those people don't really matter anymore. A lot of them are lost to history. I think about Norman Mailer Norman Mailer would have a book and it would dialogue. It would dominate the discourse. And now nobody reads Norman Mailer. And Gore Vidal. There were a lot of people who were Updike who really did. I mean, Updike just had a book of letters. So I think she would like legacy. I think she would like to matter. I think she would like to be read in college courses. I mean, I think that's what the want is. So in that way, I think that a book that's sort of literary that keeps her being talked about serves that.
If you could sit with her now and she were lucid and listening and say one true, simple thing to her, what would it be?
I don't know. I mean, I would, I'll say what I say to her on the phone or when I see her, which, I love her. I mean, I don't know that our relationship right now is the relationship. I don't know that if that makes sense. These kind of relationships are so transcendent and so, they're culmination of all those moments, not one or the other. So I don't necessarily think it matters if that makes sense. So she and I are I feel, I mean, I don't know. I feel I think we both did the best we could in that relationship, which is really all that you want. Also, not each one of my kids hopefully not each one of the kids writes a book about me, because
I was
that would
about
be
to ask you
very
that.
boring. And
Of the three, who's most likely to?
I think my daughter is the writer, so
good
that's
luck.
good.
Good luck.
I know, that's not good. She's very nice, though. She's much nicer than I am, so it might be okay. But she's also like she's like sort of more of an academic, so maybe she just will. I definitely think I'm like the dumbest member of the family.
Will you stop this?
And no, it's
I've
true.
noticed
They're
this through
like
your book.
it's really true. But they're old kids, they're not little.
Okay. Well, listen, I'm wondering if you want to turn to the audience, if some of you have got some questions. I know that Heather at the back has got a microphone that we can get to you. Anybody got something you'd love to ask Molly?
Did my mother see my success, and what was her reaction to it, and what kind of grandmother was she? She did, in fact, and she was delighted, and was very very kind of, you're the genius who I always knew you would be, and very gratified. Actually, the sweetest thing was my father-in-law, because I had been married for a really long time, and my father-in-law was this wonderful guy from Westport who was just an environmentalist and just a wonderful person. And he really loved to see me on cable news. Like, it was just like he was like a big liberal and had been really involved in like great liberal causes. And so it just felt like really gratifying. And so that made me really happy. So I definitely made the parents really happy with the cable news stuff. And that was really quite cool. And I do, like, my aunt is so excited. That is definitely really makes it all worthwhile when you end up on an RNC clip reel saying something stupid, which has happened to me. Thank you.
Molly, how has Matt felt about all this? Because obviously Matt's journey through his cancer journey has been woven through this book. How's Matt felt about it?
Not happy.
Ah, okay.
He was like, I said, you marry into this family at your own peril. He was not. He was like, not that he did not like at all. So he had to sort of get over it. It was not the best.
I did wonder.
She was a good grandmother. I mean, grandmothering, my father, who I love and think is hilarious, but is also, it was said, what's nice about being a grandparent is you have none of the mixed feelings you have about your own kids. And I was like, wait a second.
I was going to ask, I lost my mother last year, and it was so interesting because shortly after she was passed, one of her friends said to me, like, oh, don't worry, she forgives you. And I was like, fuck off. Like, what does she forgive, And it was so interesting, and now all I'm obsessed with is what the fuck is she forgiving? Right? And my mom was like a beast. My dad now has dementia, so I feel what you went through and stuff. But it's just, did you experience any of that with some of your mother's, the legacy friends? And I am a child of the 70s of New York City, so Gore Vidal, I still read Norman Mailer, like that, I buy my son his book. So I get where you grew up. So I'm just curious, did you have any of that where your mother's friends had a different opinion of your life than you had?
Yes, and I can actually do you one better than that. Which is like, people come up to me now and say insane things to me. And I'm like, and I think it's like a function of them sort of knowing you from television. And like, I'll be like, huh? And I do think, yes, people did. In fact, I always say with this book, like, there are people our age who are like, thank you for writing this book, because it's like, I don't have to feel guilty. And then there are people my mom's age who are like, like, I ran into this woman and she's like, I'm the mother of da-da-da, some friend of yours. And I said, oh, that's good. And she goes, I hope she doesn't write a tell-all about me. And I was like, and so I think people get their own insanity and then they sort of spill it onto you. I don't know. I at this point I'm always just like, thank you for watching. Thank you for reading. But I agree. That is definitely something I've noticed.
Anyone else have a question?
And you guys can ask about
Yeah.
politics if you want.
One here, one there. Yeah.
Two questions.
Yeah.
You look great for 57, and
47.
oh, I'm sorry.
47.
You still look good, but anyway.
57.
Anyway, very interesting about your grandfather being, blacklisted and being a communist and everything like that. And how do you feel now as a political person and stuff? How do you feel about the new mayor of New York City?
Oh, it's a tough question. It is, yes. So there are. Okay, I have a lot of things to say about this. The most interesting thing about this is that the mayorship of New York City has always been a cursed position, okay? So we have to pause for a minute to reflect on the fact that we have never had a mayor who was not an absolute unequivocal disaster, except for, I actually really like Bloomberg. But largely we've had a lot of problems with our mayors. So, and it tended to be when you covered it, because I would cover it for the podcast, people could not be less interested. Like, we had every mayoral candidate in 2020 and nobody cared. Like, it was, and I actually voted for the woman who did the garbage, who smoked.
Yeah.
I loved her. And then we had this mayor who'd done all these crimes.
Yeah.
And then he made a deal with the admin so that he could stay out of jail. I mean, it's just it's so bad. So what I would say is this. I think he's a very talented politician who has managed to connect with voters in a way that Democrats have struggled with. And those two things, I think, are really important. Like, he's gotten to ones and twos. He's gotten to low-frequency voters in a way that Donald Trump did. And he's gotten to working-class voters in a way that is something the Democratic Party needs to look at. Like, if you look at Dan Osborne in Nebraska, there are these candidates that are candidates that really speak to what Democrats need to do for working people, that I think is real.
Well, they lost the working person.
Right.
I mean, I lived in Manhattan
Yeah.
for 15 years. I worked there, and I can remember when Bloomberg says, "Okay, I'm declaring a thing, no smoking in the Central Park." I mean, you mean to tell me where I play chess on Saturday and Sunday with 90-year-old guys, we can't smoke a cigar?
Right.
Because he was like a dictator. But he did keep the city
really clean.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't let you have the sodas.
Yeah.
So
No big sodas.
No
Yeah,
big sodas.
exactly.
No, I listen. It was no big sodas, but the city was very clean. I think it's going to be no cigarette. He hated smoking. He hated smoke everywhere. No. So I mean, I think the big question is going to be. The mayoralship is like a management job. It's a city management job. So this person is very ideological. Some of his ideas, I think, are very, very sticky and popular with the base, and some of them seem completely undoable. When you polled his voters in exit polls, you'd say, well, he probably can't do that, and they would say, we don't care. Because you have to try. And this is something that I think is really meaningful for the Democratic Party, which is like they must try. And their voters want them to try. And can I tell a story?
Can. I'm also going to ask you, are you ever going to run yourself, Molly?
Not now. Maybe someday. Probably not, though.
Ooh,
but wait,
okay.
I'm going to tell a story. So the shutdown. I actually think they did... ultimately, when the shutdown, okay, so there was a politician who I was criticizing on television. I'm not going to say who, but you could probably figure it out. And this politician then called me up to complain about me criticizing them on television. And I said, I don't think you understand just how angry your base is. They want you to try. They will not be satisfied with we can't. Like, there is no more room for that. And I think that's a real tension that you're going to see And I don't know how that squares, but I think that in the next year, before the midterms and after the midterms, the Democratic base is not, in 2016, you could say like Orange Man bad, and it was enough. And you just raise money and have a bestseller. But I think that a lot of the people are more sophisticated, and they have needs that they feel the government should be able to provide for them. And we've seen, what was, I think, ultimately kind of bad for Republicans, but kind of good for the American people, was that COVID showed that the government can do a lot of stuff, and it can, and like what this Trump BBB thing is a skinny Obamacare repeal, so that you can, so there'll be less Medicaid and less Medicare and less rural hospitals and less. So I do ultimately think that, I think that we're going to see the Democratic leadership is going to have to step up, or they're going to have to go. And I think that criticizing that is the bare minimum that we can be doing in the pundit world.
Thank you. There was a lady, I think, just at the front. Not the front, there, just there. Perfect.
Hi, I just want to say I loved your book. I also could relate to it because I'm taking care of my elderly father. I had him at home, and I could only do that because of COVID, and I was able to work at home, and then ultimately I did have to put him into assisted living, so I really, really appreciated that. And probably, although you did hint at it, unintended consequence for you was that I decided to read Fear of Flying, which I never read, even though it's a book that I should have read. And I really got an appreciation for your mother. Yeah. She really was very groundbreaking, and I think, although people say the book is dated, and I can see as a daughter you may not want to read it because it's, got all that stuff in it, but it was a great book. So this is not even a question, it's just a compliment.
Well, I do, and I think, I really have a lot of compassion for the experience that she had in 1973 when she wrote that book, because it's like, I was doing this CBS interview, and they cut a clip of her in 1973 answering a question, but you didn't hear the question. So you could hear how defensive she was. And I thought, they must have just asked for something so sexist. And it is we forget how sexist, my mom dropped out of her doctoral program because she felt like her advisor wanted to sleep with her. And she couldn't tell that story. She would say, well, and they chased us around the table, ha, ha, ha. But the truth was she didn't feel safe there, so she dropped out. And there were that was just so the culture back then. And I think some of you guys may have experienced this culture. And so even as we go back and forth with progress, we are in such a radically different and better moment than that I do really feel for her. Yeah.
Lovely lady in the pink.
I can also relate to having a mother with dementia. I took care of her and until the end. I mourned her years before she died. You just have to do that. My sister decided that she was a very difficult mother. Right. She liked my mother better with her dementia. Yeah. And I really struggled with that comment. That really pained me. Yeah. But listening to you talk about some of this stuff that might be natural, what's your thought?
Yeah, usually the people say you mourn the person with dementia before they die because they start to die, right? They start to disappear. The person starts to leave. And I think, I really feel with so much of this, the parent relationship stuff, the good should not be the perfect should not be the enemy of the good. It's fine. If it can just be okay, that's amazing. And the fact that, my grandmother, who was really mean, became really nice when she had dementia. That's that's not uncommon. And, it just, I don't, I don't have so many judgments about, like, I just think if you can, it's funny because I can tell this story because I'm not on television, and no one tell my husband this story. But so my mother-in-law, like, kind of has dementia, and my husband cannot. So he's just like, she's fine. She does the crossword. And I'm like, okay. And like, what am I going to say? Like, no, she's not fine. Okay, does a crossword. And I think, like, so, it's okay to, I'm not going to give her the car, but it's okay to, like, if that's what he needs to, like, if that's the experience, if that's how he needs to feel about this moment, like, good for him.
I think therapeutically as well, speaking as a therapist, often siblings do see things completely differently. It's like a witness statement in a fight. People will see a completely different picture even though they were there at the same time. And I think sometimes as siblings, it's about being able to be with whatever is true for you and right for you, and allowing that other sibling to have a different experience. But I can understand why there'd be a bit of grit in the oyster there for you. Yeah.
Hi, Molly. I watch you on Morning Joe all the time. Yes. So something you said earlier, I was really interested in when you said that mainstream media has gotten a lot smaller in the last few years. Can you talk about that? Like in the last, is it the 10 years of the Trump era, the way that the media in general has changed and your experience working in that?
Yes, I can absolutely talk about that because it's all I think about. Actually, it used to be all I thought about was that AI was going to replace my job, and I would just like worry about it. And I did at one point. I said, like, all I do is worry about AI, and someone was like, that's a crazy thing to worry about. And so now I've stopped worrying about that. But I do spend a lot of time thinking about the mainstream media. So here's what I would say. So, like, the New York Times has gotten really big, which is good because I write for them. But like, the Washington Post has gotten really small. I mean, the Washington Post was, like, a real newspaper, and now its circulation is down to, like, 100,000 plus. I mean, part of that, I think, was a decision on the part of Jeff Bezos to just completely let the paper die, which is an odd choice in my mind, but okay. But, there are definitely bright, ProPublica and The Economist, and there are certainly, the Wall Street Journal has really good reporting, but it is, I mean, as someone who, like, comes from media world in the 90s, like the New Yorker, we used to have just a plethora of really good reporting and really good book reviews and really good interviews. And, you see now, like, when a TV show comes out, like, how do you, it just appears on streaming, right? Like, there's no, like, they go on a few shows, but there just isn't the same kind of world that there was. And I don't know, I mean, you hear it in different, like, I'm interested in it because I come from news, but, like, it's a problem in many different areas, right? Like in late night and in, people going to movies and theaters. And I don't know what the answer is. Like, I don't think that, or at least I hope that the answer isn't people watching, like, 5-minute clip, 2-minute clips on TikTok. I hope that the answer is, like, more movies and, more newspapers, and that this problem does end up solving itself. But I don't know. But it is really hard to watch. And, like, for such a long time, we had 3 cable news channels. And now, I mean, I think it's to the benefit of MS that CNN has committed seppuku in its own weird way. So good for us. But, like, it's definitely very strange. And then to watch, like, what's happening at CBS. I think a lot of people don't have cable. I think eventually most people will stream their news, so that'll be good. And you're seeing already, I mean, it's funny with this 25 cycle, because I was like, I somehow now can't figure out how to work my cable box anymore. So I am watching it on streaming, and you can find all the news on streaming now. But it's just like that transition from cable boxes. I mean, what's so ironic is, like, cable really did kill itself. Like, they had a chance to, like, bring all the news online, and the cable companies were like, no, our carriage fees are that you have to stay on cable. And so it ended up being that they sort of just disappeared themselves. So I hope that there'll be more. I mean, there are certainly a lot of people writing on Substack. I don't think that business model is sustainable, because why would you pay $6 for one person when you could pay $20 for the New York Times? But I do think that I think there'll be more because people want to read and they want to know what's happening. I hope.
Let's all hope.
Hi.
Hello.
And actually, maybe my question, that may have been part of the answer of too, but why do you think out of everything, the only thing of everything terrible that seems to have everyone in a cohesive state
I know what you're
is
going to ask.
Epstein?
I knew you were going to ask. It's funny because I have to go write a column about it after this, and I was like pitching my editor on the way here, and I was like, and he was like, well, it is the only story. And I was like, yes, it is. Why do I think it's the only I actually think it's not. I think there's more going on behind the scenes. Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, okay. So, the question is, why does Epstein matter so much? And, right, it's why does it feel like it's the thing that has really stuck? And I would say, I think there are other things happen. Okay, so there are a couple things going on here. One is that the Oversight Committee in the House has done a very good job rolling this out. And they have been really skilled at how they've gotten those emails out and how they've done it. And you know, we made fun of Mike Johnson for sending Congress home because of the Epstein files, because of the shutdown, but he was actually probably right. Because now that Congress is back and the shutdown is over, it's like Epstein-palooza. So that was bad for him. So this tranche of emails that just came out are the emails from the estate, the subpoenaed emails from the estate. And then I know that there were more emails that came out that were from a FOIA request from Bloomberg, from a guy called Jason Leopold, who does these FOIA requests. And there's just a lot of emails. I think there's quite a lot more to their videos, their photographs. There's just a ton. I think there are other things going on behind the scenes, like with inflation, and people don't like the troops in the streets. Like, I think it's a combination of all those things. But I think at the end of the day, they were in 2016, like if you go back to QAnon, like in 2016, Donald Trump literally said, like, there's a cabal of Democrats who are abusing children, right? And these are John Podesta's emails, okay? He literally said that, right? He basically said exactly what the Epstein stuff is, right? They are, and then he sort of ran on that, right? He's gonna save the children. He's gonna end QAnon. Fast forward, now these emails that are literally like, the guy is a sex predator, Jeffrey Epstein, and in it are like Larry Summers and Donald Trump, and I'm sure Bill Clinton is in there too. And it's like, this is the whole sort of narrative, the terrifying narrative that, by the way, goes back in American history. There's always been a sort of like anxiety that there's a secret cabal of like powerful elites abusing children. Like, this is, if you think about, like, it's like the Da Vinci Code. It's sort of a trope. But yeah, I think it's just, and then just the sheer volume of emails and the fact that they keep coming, and that the fact that Trump World was even so recently, as like a couple months ago, handing out binders to influencers saying, like, Epstein Files Phase 1. Like, that did not help them. Right. Right, I know Megyn Kelly, that was not a good look. No, not good.
I know we're coming near to time. Anyone got any more questions about the book? I know politics is keeping us all very busy. Anything else about the book? At the front.
Oh, did I choose the title before or after the book? After I wrote the book. So I had a title that was like, losing Erica Jong or something like that, and they were like, that's not a good title. And I always pick bad titles, and so I was like, what about, and they were like, no, this is a good title. So I had a good title, and I was like, oh my. So I was like mid-book when I came up with it. So it was very exciting. And titles, you really don't want to mess up the title.
Molly, in chapter 4, I was going to read a couple of lines to you, given you talked about this year that you had. You said there's something freeing about a bomb going off in the middle of your life, about your worst fears coming true. Tell us what has become of that for you now, as you look back on that year and the bomb going off. What now?
I mean, I think, you don't want your spouse to get cancer. That's bad. But you get to see sort of how you're able to like, I feel like we were able to sort of get through it in an amazing way. And that was very liberating, and and for him to be okay. But it was tough. And I think it was actually really, really tough on the kids in a way. Like, I kept thinking like, well, I'm doing a great job of not telling the kids. And I think it was really tough on them. Like, I don't think, the people I know who've had experiences where they've had like a parent get really sick, like it does really shape the calculus. And I definitely think for them they were really good sports, and they were very like, we're fine, don't worry about us. And I think it was, I think, like, I know because we're a couple years from it, like, I just see how traumatic it was for them.
Final question, Molly.
Yes.
In losing your mother,
Yes.
what did you find in yourself?
I mean, I think that I found that I was a grown-up, and that, like, a lot of the stuff I thought I needed from a parent, I didn't really need.
You had it all along.
Yes.
Always inside. I got it. Thank you for your candor and your humour and your generosity in the story. It holds lots of love and pain side by side, which I think is what's so beautiful about this book. And I think it reminds us all that loss doesn't begin with death and love doesn't end with disappointment. I think they run alongside each other. So I think the bravest act of all is that we see our parents clearly and then we love them anyway. That seems to be what I've heard from you tonight. We love them anyway. So those of you that haven't read the book, I strongly advise that you do. It is wonderful. I have to read a lot given the job I do. And I have to tell you, I just couldn't put it down. It was genuinely funny and heartfelt and provocative. All the things that you are, clearly. It's wonderful. There's definitely copies at the back. Molly, you're going to sign some for us, I believe. I know you've got a column to write about Epstein. But before you do that, there's some signing to do. And to say thank you to all of you for coming out tonight as well. But a big round of applause to Molly.